Hi there! Today I'm really excited about this recipe because it's one I've had for a long time and I've never tried because there's one ingredient that I didn't know where to get. Well, I should have looked at Amazon. You can get just about anything there. So I'll tell you about that in a minute, but first let me tell you what this is. This is a soup and it's called pumpkin and apple, wait a minute, roasted pumpkin apple soup. Doesn't that sound good? I thought so. So they're calling butternut squash pumpkin, and actually in Korean, the word for any kind of pumpkin is just, any kind of squash or pumpkin is pumpkin. Well, here in English, we make a difference between squash and pumpkin. And I'm going to use a butternut squash because that's what it calls for. I'm actually going to be using 2 of these because it calls for 4 pounds. That's a lot. So chances are we're going to have a lot of leftovers. But I'm just going to make the whole thing because I've been waiting for so long to try this. So it's got pumpkins, and then you're supposed to get 4 large, what does it say? Sweet-tart apples. So I went to the store and I thought, sweet-tart. I thought about getting Granny Smith. Those are tart, not that sweet. So I ended up getting my favorite apple. These days it's my favorite apple, which is a Pink Lady. And it's sweet and tart. It's not huge, so it calls for 4 large apples. I have another half of an apple in the fridge that I didn't eat, so I'm going to use 4.5, but you know, this is not an exact thing. So in addition to the pumpkin, which is really squash, and apple, we're also going to need some olive oil, and I'm just going to use plain olive oil. Got this from Trader Joe's. Plain olive oil. And of course, salt and pepper. And, okay, so I have a sage bush in my yard. So I just went and picked what I believe will be about a tablespoon worth of fresh sage leaves. And this stuff, smells so good. I love the smell of sage, fresh sage. Okay, what else do I need? I'm gonna need some chicken broth. And of course, this is what I like to use. My Chinese vegetarian chicken flavored broth powder. And then I'm gonna need some hazelnuts, which I had in my freezer. So I'm gonna need some of those, 1/3 cup, and we'll toast those, but we'll do that later. And finally, what's the thing that I never could find? Roasted hazelnut oil. Thank you, Amazon. You can find just about anything there. I'm not crazy about giving my business to this humongous, almost monopoly, but give it to them. They carry just about anything you can think of. So anyway, hazelnut oil. And that is all we need. So let's start off by getting our apples and squash ready. So I've washed all of the produce, all of the apples and the squash. I had already washed my sage leaves. So now I'm going to turn on the oven, preheat the oven to 450. It's going to be a hot oven. So got that going. Let's come over here and get the vegetables. Let's come over here and get the produce ready to cook. Let's start off with the butternut squash. Now, this is not one of my favorite things to do in the kitchen. Peel a butternut squash. It's not fun. It's not easy. So I'm going to just cut off the two ends and just, I'm going to rock it. There. And now, let's see how this goes. I'm just going to use a vegetable peeler. And I just looked this up because I'm sure there are easier ways to do this. As you can see, this is not an easy way to do it. But this is what I saw on 2 YouTube videos. So, okay, I'll just do it like this. Maybe I need a new vegetable peeler. I don't know. I have put it in the microwave, you know, stabbed the outside with a fork a few times and cooked it a little bit, and you can do that, but I haven't found a wonderful, easy trick yet. Maybe I will still. Okay, I did this one and it was really not fun. I used this. So I'm going to use another method for this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off both ends. I'm trying to take as little as possible off of this end. There. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is take a fork. Yes, this is the other method I mentioned. And jab it. Jab it. I'm not sure why we jab it, but we jab it. This is the same thing we do with potatoes when we're baking a potato in the microwave. Okay, so now I'm going to microwave this for 3.5 minutes, and let's see if that makes it easier. I've got the squash cooking in the microwave, so I may as well start chopping up this other one that I already did. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take it, I'm going to cut it above the bulbous part. You always have this long part and this bulbous part. So I'm going to cut it there. And I'll go ahead and do this part first. Cut it in half. We want to use a spoon to scrape all that out. So, spoon, scrape the seeds and the membrane out, and throw it away. A little stubborn. So see what I'm doing here? There. Makes it easier if you put the cut side down on your board, and then just scrape that stuff out the best you can. Okay, 3.5 minutes is up. I'm gonna come get the butternut squash out of the microwave, and I'm going to use a towel because this is going to be hot. So, close that. Come back here. Let's see how this goes. Okay, you can see some areas are kind of dark, so they're cooked. So, I guess I'll start off with, let's try using the vegetable peeler to start off and see if that goes easier. Well, maybe I'll do it up here. Yeah, that's easier. It cooks the skin a little bit, so it's softer and it peels easier. You might want to wait until it's cooled if you have time to do that. I'm just going to hold it with a towel. Yeah, this is easier. Okay. Okay, I've done it. So it was easier to peel the cooked squash, but this stuff is really hard to get out. So I'm not going to worry too much about it because I have another way. We want to cut these into about 2-inch cubes. So I'll just do it like this. And then, to get this stuff off, I'm just going to use a paring knife, a little knife, and just cut it off. There, that's better. And I'm going to put these into this large bowl. You're going to need a large bowl. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all of these up into these chunks. Make sure I get all that stuff off and drop them in the bowl. And that's what I'm going to do now. You saw me do the bulbous part. Now I want to show you the long part that doesn't have seeds, and it's much easier. So since we just have to cut it into 2-inch chunks, this is a breeze. So I cut it in half, and this one is one of the partially cooked ones. So just about 2 inches. I'm just going to cut it in half again. That's a little more than 2, but that's all right. So just cut them like that, and you got your chunks. We'll do the same thing with this one. These are huge chunks. It's very hard for me to not cut them smaller. Anyway, so I'll do that with the rest of them, and we'll take it from there. I've got all my pumpkin cut into cubes and peeled. I see a little thing there. Apples are going to be much easier. All we have to do is cut them into 1/8 and remove the seeds. We don't even have to peel these. So cut into 2. Four. Cut out the seeds part. And then cut that in half. That's it. So I'm going to do this with all 4 apples, and then I'll cut the half that I have that was in the refrigerator into 4ths, and that'll be 1/8 of the apple. Anyway, you'll see. All right, got it all done. And yeah, I needed a really big bowl. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in some freshly ground pepper. It says 1/4 cup. Oh, I don't think I told you where this recipe came from. Came from eatingwell.com. I've gotten a number of good recipes from that website. So there's my pepper. I'm going to put some salt. It says put a teaspoon of salt, but I'm going to put a little less because I'm going to be using that salty chicken flavoring. So I'm going to put a little less. Plus, we're not big on salt. And I used my Himalayan salt, but it's just because I got it cheap. Okay, and 1/4 cup of olive oil. Which sounds like a lot, but there is a lot of stuff here. So I'm going to put this in here, and I'm going to stir it up and pour it into a sheet pan, which I will bake it in. While the squash and apples are baking, roasting, I'm going to go ahead and prepare the rest of the ingredients. And I'm going to start with my stack of sage leaves. So I'm just going to chop them. Do it like this. I'm chopping them about of 1/4 of an inch pieces. There. Okay, now I'll be ready for that. And I'll put it in one of these. I love that smell. All right, and then set that aside. And I've got a 1/3 cup of hazelnuts, and I didn't tell you where I got these, but I got them at Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's is great. Get all kinds of things from Trader Joe's. I'm not going to worry about the skins. You can remove them if you want, but it's not necessary here. So I'm just going to chop these. And I'll tell you, these go on top, so, you know, you don't have to have powder. You just want to have chopped hazelnuts. So, here's how I do it. Making sure that I get all the nuts. Some of them will try to get away from you. And that looks good to me. Ta-da! Okay, so I'm just gonna leave these here. Actually, I don't think I need the chopping board anymore, so I can just leave them on that. There's one more thing we need to do with those nuts. We need to toast them. So here's what I'm gonna do. I have a skillet here. It's a non-stick. I don't know if that really matters for this, but that's what I have here, skillet. I'm going to turn that on a medium-low heat to start off with, closer to medium, because I want to heat up the pan. And I'm just going to put this in the pan with nothing else in there. And now I'm going to stir them and cook them for just a couple minutes until they're toasted, and you'll know by the smell. You could do this. Shake it up a little bit. You can't really go by the color. I mean, a little bit you can, but you've got these skins that are brown, so that can trick you into thinking you've got a browned, you know, toasted nut when it's just brown skin. Best way is to smell it. You'll smell this wonderful toasted hazelnut smell. When you get to that point, you're going to want to turn off the heat, and it's best to remove the nuts from the pan because they'll keep toasting as long as they're in the hot pan. So I have one of those ramekins, little glass bowls that I use. I'll put it in that. think that's good enough. Turn it off. And I'll put it in here, and it'll be all ready to put on top of the soup when it's served. Yeah, wish I could give you a smell. The timer just went off. It's been 15 minutes, so I'm going to stir the pumpkin and apple. It's quite heavy. So, just gonna stir it gently. I can see that it's starting to get a little brown on the edges. That's good. Okay. And now I'm going to put it back in the oven and set the timer for another 15 minutes before they're done. The apples and squash are done, at least the buzzer went off, the timer. So let's take a look, see if it's really done. All right, looks pretty good. But not completely done. So what we have to do now is get the chopped sage. Chopped sage, and I'm going to spread that around. And I'll stir that just a little bit. And I'm gonna put it back for 15 or 20 minutes until it's totally done. And this place ought to be smelling pretty good with all that sage being cooked. Okay, and then spread it back out. And pop it back in the oven. And then I want all of that sage to be in there. So when this is done, we're going to be cooking it with some broth. So this would be a good time to get 6 cups of broth out, ready to go. 15 more minutes, broth, and I'll be back with you. I've taken the apples and squash out of the oven. Let's see if they're done. I mean, they could go for another 5 minutes. Yeah. I mean, I could let it cook a little bit longer. But I think it's good enough because I'm going to cook it a little bit more in the broth. So here's what we're gonna do. Turn off the oven. And now my kitchen's all nice and toasty. And I'm going to come back over here. And I've got my blender container. So I'm going to put about 1/3 of this in my blender container. So let's see. Okay, that's about 1/3. And then I have my 6 cups of broth. And what I did is I used about 4 teaspoonsful of the broth in 6 cups of water. Might not be enough, but you know, you can always check later. So I'm going to pour about a couple of cups in here. Oh, that's only 1. Doesn't have to be exact, but you know, about like that. I'm going to puree this. I'm then going to put it in that pot, my Dutch oven. And I'm going to repeat with the rest of these. Just about 1/3, about 1/3 of the squash and apple and 1/3 of the chicken broth. Excuse me, my goodness. Chicken broth. Done. Oh. I keep forgetting I have a spout here. It's going to work better to use it like this. So here's my soup. Get that out. And what I did is I kept a little bit of the broth back. I'll show you why. Well, that's why I've got this big, thick thing going on here. So what I'm going to do is wipe my fingers.